All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning for our COVID-19 Small Business Forum series in partnership with the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce and the Dr. Lucy Jones Center for Science and Society. Just some quick housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded and will be distributed out to everybody who attended and registered, so you will have access to all of the information we'll be providing today, including the chat. Please keep yourself on mute. And if you do have any questions, there is a chat box. Please enter your questions there, and we will be answering all of your questions at the end. The questions at the end will be answered by John Brary, who is with the Dr. Lucy Jones Center. The purpose of this webinar today is to hopefully answer all of your questions as it relates to the PPP and to give you a step-by-step walkthrough of the application process, no matter which lender you decide to go through. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker. He is a board member of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. He's been a champion for the Chamber for years. He is the Senior Vice President, Retail and Small Business Credit Manager for Wells Fargo, Brian Moeller. Brian, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. And good morning, everybody. I'm really happy I'm able to join you all today. And I know that this is a very exciting topic for many of our small business owners out there and very important. And a lot has happened since the CARES Act was signed into law a week ago Friday. And many of the banks out there are participating in the program. And I just wanted to caveat my comments today. As was just mentioned, we have different banks that are rolling the process out and having different levels of participation in the program based on different levels of capacity, as well as their ability to get through their application queues. And not all banks are SBA lenders, and not all SBA lenders are participating in the program. So one of the first things that I wanted to go over is where do I start? If I'm a small business owner and I've been watching this on the news, certainly, you know, what's happening in the economy, what's happening with the various restrictions and regulations, you know, a lot of business owners need help today. And where do I go? Where do I start? How do I know if I qualify, if I'm eligible? And then with the application process, through these webinars, and then also at work, in my day job in Wells Fargo, we've received so many different questions, and some of them are pretty common. And I just want you to know that the LA Chamber and VIXL Exchange is committed to publishing a version of the frequently asked questions that we keep hearing and the technical assistance centers keep hearing. And we'll get through some of the main ones today. So as we go through this, hopefully I'll proactively ask about I'll proactively get to some of the questions that you'll have, but feel free to hit the chat button within the Zoom program and enter your questions there. If we don't get to all of your questions, I just want you to know that after this webinar, there's a team of folks that will be going through the questions and adding them to our master list, which we hope to be publishing onto the website very soon. So with that, I also want to express my warm wishes to all of the folks that have been affected by this, and I hope you, your families, and your employees are all safe today and taking part in the social distancing that is recommended by the CDC, as well as by the LA County, LA City, and state of California. Our team members at Wells Fargo are taking this very seriously, being a critical infrastructure along with the other banks out there. You know, we're continuing to keep our doors open, show up for work, and those of us who can work at home are working at home. And the priority of keeping our team members safe and keeping our customers safe remains our top priority. Of course, we, along with the other lenders in the community, are making it a very high priority to make sure that we can get access to capital to all of the small businesses that we can. And there's many different options out there. And I hope that you'll find the service that you need, whether through your own financial institution or through the many partners, including CDFIs, CDCs. There are several government loan funds available out there as well, with the city of LA, with the state of California. Different municipalities have different microloan funds. And then, of course, all of our SBDC partners across Los Angeles, including our very own at the Chamber at Bixel Exchange. So the Bixel Exchange has now 50 advisors available to help with specific questions and packaging and helping folks make introductions. So with that, I wanted to start with making sure that everyone on the call knows where to go to access certain resources. And then I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of the application that's available with most lenders. Many different banks actually have different application processes. The larger banks have, it seems, mostly put their applications online and are not using the paper application, but some banks are using the application that's published on the SBA website, and we'll get to that in just a second. So let me see if I can first share my screen here. All right. All right, David, are you able to see?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Right here is the website of the Department of Treasury, and I found this to be super helpful in directing small business owners as well as lenders to. You can easily get to the frequently asked questions and some of the documents that I've found to be very helpful. So on the front page of the US Treasury Department website, you can click this banner up here and it will send you to some links that will really help navigate some of the questions that you might have. There's a frequently asked questions link on here, and many of the questions that might be on your minds could be found here about eligibility standards. And this is consistent across all lenders, and the Treasury and the Small Business Administration, they cooperate and they share documentation. And one thing that I've learned over the last 10 days, that many of these documents have changed with some of the amendments that have been made to the Act in its implementation. So I've come back here pretty often to see what new documents are on here and how it applies to the various SBA rules as well. So one of the main questions that folks have had is, how do I calculate those employees that are being paid over $100,000, and why did they cap this? Do I eliminate employees from my calculation? And what I've learned is that the spirit of the program is primarily to help those who need help the most, and small business owners. The cap is 10 million per business. However, what I anticipate seeing is that it's going to be most applicable to the smaller businesses. And I think that in the spirit of the act, they didn't want to show large amounts of compensation going to employees that earn over $100,000. So how do I calculate this as part of my payroll run? Those employees do count, but for those individuals that earn over $100,000, you should only include up to $100,000 to add into the numerator of your calculation. It goes into some different paid sick leave questions. Also for third party and independent contractors. Independent contractors has been a question that continues to come up. Many small business owners, they actually leverage 1099s and independent contractors themselves. So question 15, should payments that an eligible borrower made to an independent contractor be included in calculation? So the answer is no. Any amounts that an eligible borrower has paid to an independent contractor or another sole prop should be excluded from the eligible business's payroll costs. However, an independent contractor or sole prop will itself be eligible for a loan under the PPP. So ultimately, the program is looking to buoy small business owners and give them extra money in order to keep people on their payroll. So those people that you're doing business with that you might hire as independent contractors, they themselves are actually eligible. So that employee can receive the benefit from the program. They simply just need to apply themselves and be eligible themselves. So those are a couple of the bigger questions that I found pretty helpful. If I go back to the Treasury Department website, the interim final rule, this is a document that was sent out to all of the SBA lenders. There's quite a bit of legal language in this document, and it's a little bit longer than the other one, but it too also has some really terrific basic frequently asked questions. So am I eligible? You're eligible if you have 500 or fewer employees whose principal residence is the United States, or are a business that operates in a certain industry and meets applicable SBA employee-based size standards. So it goes into the definition that lenders are being held accountable to for eligibility requirements. So instead of going through these frequently asked questions, why don't we take a look at the application itself? And the lender application form is found here. It's also found on the SBA's website. So you can get to the SBA website very easily as well. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to pull the application form up from here. So let's see. This is one version. Let me get to the SBA's. Okay, here we go. So I have the PDF version of this. It will help me to show everyone a little bit easier. Sorry. All right, now hopefully you can see it a little bit bigger. So firstly, you're going to want to check off what type of business you are. They have included additional choices here from the first iteration of the application. So I know that this paper application has been floating around over the last week because the SBA has posted a couple of different versions. For those of you just starting, I would send you to that website so that you're sure to have the most latest version. So you want to start with your business's legal name. You want to make sure this matches what's on your tax returns, or 990 if you're a nonprofit. Then of course your DBA. Many folks do get confused between their legal name and DBA. If you're a sole prop, the business legal name typically is the name of yourself, individual. You want the business address, EIN, phone, primary contact, and email. It may not be the owner. It may be somebody else that does your paperwork. That's okay. I would make sure that your lender does have you, the owner, and authorized signers' contact information in case they have questions. So the average payroll, and this is what seems to be getting a lot of folks confused, is how do I calculate my average monthly payroll? So for the most part, what they're asking for is for you to take an average of your 2019 total payroll for the year, divide it by 12, and that will give you your average payroll costs. So the other more complicated aspects to that is if your business is potentially seasonal, if your current payroll looks a lot different, maybe you have a mix of payments made to yourself as an employee versus employees. Also, as far as the multiplication of 2.5 times, and how does this fit into the forgiveness aspect of the loan when within the PPP program, the forgivable part is an 8-week period, but they're inviting you to do 2.5 times that. So let me demystify that a little bit. And for the monthly payroll, we want to make sure that you're calculating several different things. You want to include your healthcare costs, so employee benefits, PTO, LOA, people on leave, those totals count. Taxes paid to local and state count. And many of the lenders out there are asking for documentation on payroll in the form of your Form 941, which is the quarterly form that business owners typically use to analyze payroll costs. Another thing that I would invite you to do is connect with your CPA. Many of the CPAs out there, they already have Excel calculators built and can help walk you through this, as well as making sure that you're not leaving anything out. You can also ask whoever does your payroll to run a year-to-date payroll report. I know the major payroll companies enable you to go online and run a report based on some date ranges and make sure those things match up. Hopefully the 941 will match up with your QuickBooks, which will match up with your payroll report, and you'll have a pretty good idea. If you don't get it exactly perfect down to the penny, that's okay. I think lenders are really looking for your best estimate here. So you take your average monthly payroll cost, multiply that by 2.5 times, and that will be the number that you put into this box right here. Number of employees, that's pretty easy to calculate. And then how are you going to be using the loan? And you're going to be asked later in the application to attest what the use of the loan is, and basically guarantee that you'll be using this funds for the intended purpose of the loan. There's also the EIDL in here. This is the Emergency Disaster Relief loan that is also available through the SBA. So they want you to include this amount if you've already received funds for that. And just so everyone knows, if you've already applied for that loan, that doesn't preclude you from applying for this loan, and vice versa. If you apply for the PPP and you decide you want to take advantage of the EIDL, that's okay as well. There's one sticking point that I want to make everyone aware of, and that's that we want to make sure that you're not using the loan for the same purpose. So if you're using one for payroll and the other one you're asking for payroll, the government is very wary of providing loans that would be potentially double dipping and covering the same cost or the same purpose. So keep that in mind if you're one of those folks that is looking to apply for both loans. I see there's more questions coming in here. So for the ownership, you list all owners of at least 20% or more of the equity, owner name, title, ownership. So the EIN or social security number of that owner, and then the home address of the owner. So with the questions, you'll be asked to attest to basically these 8 questions here, and I'm going to go through them rather quickly, and it may create some more questions in the chat box. But suspension, debar, proposed for debarment, declared ineligible, these are things that different agencies or departments have. If you're a corporation under suspension with the state of California, for example, it could prevent you from moving forward with the application. Has the applicant or any business owned or controlled by any of them ever obtained a loan from the SBA or any other federal agency that is currently delinquent or has defaulted in the last 7 years and caused a loss to the government? Is the applicant or any owner of the applicant an owner of any other business or have common management with any other business? If yes, list all such businesses and describe their relationship on a separate sheet identified as Addendum A. So a question has come up, do owners who have multiple entities, are they able to apply for their own PPP loan? And what we've been told is the answer is yes. You know, people might have 5 different businesses, and the idea and the purpose of the loan is to support the cost of the employees. So what I think lenders will be looking for is, are there any employees that perhaps work at multiple businesses? And it's common for some business owners to share services and actually have a person on the payroll of multiple businesses, and they want to make sure that they're not creating a scenario where they're potentially double dipping support for that particular employee, but they want to cover as many employees as possible. Have you received a EIDL loan? If yes, provide details on a separate sheet. Is the applicant an individual subject to indictment, criminal information, arraignment, or other means by which formal criminal charges brought in any jurisdiction or presently incarcerated or on probation or parole? So this is an eligibility question. In the last 5 years, for any felony, has the applicant or any owner pleaded guilty, been convicted, pleaded nolo contender, or been placed on pretrial diversion, or has been placed on any form of parole or probation? It's the United States principal place of residence for all employees of the applicant included in the applicant's payroll calculation above. So this is a simple question, and I know that there have been many questions that have come up about undocumented employees. Employees are employees if it is a legal employee. I have not heard of any lender asking for any personal information about employees. However, we want to make sure that the employees that we're looking to support are actually residing here in America. Is the applicant a franchise? That's listed in the franchise directory. So this question has come up for many business owners that perhaps is a McDonald's owner and has 2 locations. These applications become a little bit more complex because there are some different association rules with these applications. And my advice to those business owners that are part of a larger association, I would advise you to check with the administrator of your association and make sure that you're using the applicable program for that association. Many times they're tied to a preferred lender as well, and it may expedite your application process. So on the next page, there's some certifications here. I won't go through each of them, but I wanted to point out a couple of them. We are asking for the business owners to certify that it's the current economic uncertainty due to the COVID virus. Certainly the funds based on the intention of the program is going to be used to retain workers and maintain payroll. The money can be used for mortgage interest payments, lease payments, utility payments, as is certainly payroll. But I know that there are many businesses that have since furloughed or terminated their employees, and they may be using this money for these other expenses with the business. And that's okay. However, it does bring you into the eligibility of the forgiveness aspect of the loan, which has to do with an 8-week period after the loan is originated. If you do not have folks on the payroll, or you have a lower amount than what your average payroll was before, that does affect the calculation of the amount of the loan that is actually forgiven. So that also can be potentially confusing for some business owners. And I understand that loan forgiveness will be provided for the sum of documented payroll costs, covered mortgage interest payments, covered rents, covered utilities, and not more than 25% of the forgiven amount may be for non-payroll costs. So some of the amount in that 8-week period can fall into that forgivable part, but 75% of it is really going to be relative to the payroll that that you have during that period. All right, so with that, so I acknowledge that the lender will confirm the eligible amount, and also the lender is given the authority to ask for other supporting documents. I've talked to many business owners that have been requested lists of documents that do include 941, perhaps the 2 years tax returns, payroll report, other documentation will likely be requested when they're looking at the forgivable aspect of the loan down the line after the 8-week period is up. So with that, David, maybe we can start opening it up or going through and trying to answer some questions. And I know we have a few folks from Bixel Exchange that are going to be helping me answer some of these questions, as well as I know we have some Wells Fargo folks out there, and keep an eye on the chat box.
Great. Actually, this is John Buary from the Dr. Lucy Jones Center, and we have been scrolling through and collecting and combining a lot of these questions that have come through the chat. Thank you all so much for your questions, and we're going to try to get to as many as we can in the next 30 minutes or so. I'd like to start with some basic ones that have come through, and Brian, I think you could probably just clarify. I know some folks may not have heard the beginning of your presentation. One clarifying question. Are we actually applying to an individual bank or to the SBA and they process the application? So is the SBA processing this, or is the bank, or what's the relationship there?
Yeah, for the PPP loan, that is being done through lenders that are licensed to provide SBA 7A loans. You could be confusing this particular program with the EIDL, which is a program that you can only apply directly through the SBA at the SBA website.
Great. How long does loan processing to funding? Do we have an idea, or is that dependent on the financial institution?
Yeah, it's still too soon to tell. I know I have heard that loans are starting to go out. We're starting to see approvals. I think each bank is going to process things a little bit differently. Some lenders began getting information from interested parties early in the week last week. Others turned on their information gathering on Friday or Saturday. Some are getting started today. So I couldn't really speak on behalf of the financial services industry, because each lender is going to be working through their queue a little bit differently based on their capacity. I would say on behalf of Wells Fargo and the financial service industry, please be patient with these folks. It's been a very busy week for all the lenders out there, tooling the process, getting the folks in place behind the scenes. And just know that our employees and team members and families have been affected by what's going on as well. So our usual shops may not be up to the usual capacity. And I would just say, when you do meet with a banker and get started with the program, give them some additional time, and just know that we are all working as hard and fast as we can to get money out there as quickly as we can.
This question just keeps coming up over and over again, and I want to address it about if a financial institution is not currently open, was open and now says they're at capacity, or can you explain what's the process there? Especially, it's specifically, looks like a lot of folks have been trying to apply through either Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or Chase, and they either haven't heard back or they say that it's closed. Could you clarify or give an understanding of what that might mean?
Yeah, I know that some banks are starting and opening the doors to the program to their own customers. I know some banks have limited eligibility to customers that currently have a banking relationship, or I've heard some lenders limit it to those customers where they currently have a lending relationship. And as far as opening these windows for folks to apply, I think that it's staggered based on the backshop capacity to ensure that they are able to serve those which they're bringing in. So different banks, they're able to carve out the funds available to be sure that they're going to be able to put that money out. And with the demand out there, not all banks have a balance sheet with the capacity, and not all lenders have the capacity to work with the secondary market to make loans, package them, and then sell the paper on the secondary market out the back door. I know that the Treasury and the Fed has made commitments to be a buyer of this paper, but not all lenders are set up to work that way. Many lenders keep their SBA loans on their own balance sheet, so they have a finite amount to lend. I can tell you that customer experience is the top of mind of lenders, and to ensure that those customers that have raised their hand to apply get a prompt response. They've limited the intake so as to ensure that those folks that they know that they can help will get helped.
So this is sort of a follow-up that looks like from a couple ways. People have been asking, can they apply to multiple banks, and do they have to have an existing relationship with the bank, and does it hurt your chances, help your chances, etc.?
Well, the first place to start is with your own bank. And if you're if your bank isn't open to it, isn't a provider, our guidance is to go to the SBA website, and they have a really great tool that I'm going to try sharing my screen again and pull it up here. So on the SBA website, they have, and I can copy this and put it into the chat box. You can basically type in your zip code in order to find an SBA provider in your area, and you can actually zoom in and out on the map to, let's see, it's not letting me here. All right. To provide a larger geography, which will show, different banks, based on the map that you're using. So I know I'm not doing a great job at showing you, but there's, over 1,000 lenders that you could potentially apply for. And if your bank or a banker that isn't able to help you, I encourage you to look for a lender that is open and can help you. And the place to start is the SBA site, simply because there are many people getting lots of risk for fraud and scammers out there. There's packagers and people acting as agents for SBA lenders. And I would go direct to what the SBA says is an actual lender.
Great. Here's a couple things we're going to cover in the next couple of minutes. I just want to let you know, we're going to talk about independent contractors. We're going to talk about nonprofits and ownership. But I want to get through something that's sort of related to this one first. And that's related to, it goes back one step actually to timing. For loan forgiveness of a non-essential business, when does the 8 weeks start? Is it 8 weeks after funding? Is there some other timeline? And what's the 25% within that 8 weeks?
Right. It's my understanding that it's upon origination. So once you get the money, so origination and funding, should be the same day. That's my understanding.
And does it matter that employees may not be able to work if you get funded, and then the employees are either not able to come to work because the government has told them not to, or some other reason? Does that take into the calculation? Do we know?
I think it goes back to the spirit of the program, which is encouraging small business owners to keep their people on payroll, so that they're not going to EDD, that you're not terminating staff, so that when we do go into the recovery, it will be less of an impact on the economy for folks to then have to go through the process of rehiring or potentially retraining different people if you've let go of your employees. So the fact that you might have people staying at home, I think the way that the program is set up is to encourage you to continue to pay them, even though that they're hourly.
Great. There's a couple of specific questions that have come through a couple of times. Do all applicants need to submit a 1040C for this loan?
A 1040C?
Yeah, that's all I've been given, and it came in twice, so I just wanted to.
That I do not know.
So
put it on the list. We'll get back to it. Hopefully,
on our list, we'll definitely hit that. What about sole proprietors? People who are, don't pay themselves or do pay themselves. Does paying yourself count if you're the only employee as a sole proprietor?
Yes.
Okay. And due to AB 5, we changed 1099 employees on January 1st. How do we best calculate payroll? What date should we use for employee count? 2019, 214, or current?
Um, for situations like that, I think it's best to go to the, you want to use perhaps January and February as your average months. And I'm sure your lender will provide you guidance on this and work with you. But what I found is that, what you're really looking to calculate is what your average payroll is going to be for the forgivable period. And the program is set to create incentive for keeping people employed through this downturn. So if you use January and February, perhaps, I think that should be fine as your average. Your lender may ask for different documentation. They may ask for 2019 documentation. And if you have that information from the other forms for the last year, show them what you got and see if that works for them. I think the more stringent documentation that is going to be asked of you is when you submit for the forgiveness period.
Great. Switching gears just slightly, and then we can come back to more of these questions. We've seen a number of times asked about nonprofits. Who do they fill in for owners? As everyone knows, a nonprofit is not owned by anyone. There's no one person. Who do they put for the owner?
For nonprofit, it's my understanding that it would be somebody that would be who would be authorized to enter into a financial agreement. For your typical 501c3, that tends to be somebody listed as chairman or president, secretary, or treasurer. And it also depends on who an authorized signer is with the bank that you're going with. So you may have to be prepared to provide your articles of organization, with the application so that whoever is signing would be the right person to ensure authorization. In the ownership percentage box, typical nonprofits don't have any ownership in the organization. You would put 0.
Great. Someone wrote, do general contractors have to write themselves a paycheck in order to qualify?
I think a general contractor, it depends on how their business is set up. Is it a DBA? Is it a sole proprietorship? Do they run payroll? How do they pay themselves out of their business? I think it's a unique scenario that depends on how you set up your business.
Great. I have a small business with 5 individuals on payroll and 18 through a temp agency. Do all my employees qualify for the program? The temp agency has over 500, so they're not applying. So is it just that it's not the temp, it's only the actual payrolled employees that qualify?
That would be my understanding, because the employees would not be listed in your 941 as employed by your business. They would be employees of the temp business, from what I understand. And if that temp business 1099s those people, then they themselves as independent contractors could then apply for themselves.
Great.
That's good. That's a complicated one.
There's a question that continues to sort of come up about self-employed. If you don't take payroll, but you're self-employed, so you don't actually have a payroll, how do you calculate that?
I would go to one of the Q&A documents, and let's get back to that one. I'm going to try to find it in the Q&A document here and see if there's an official guidance on that calculation.
Great. And I see, I appreciate just to all the participants, I see your questions coming in, And we still have another 15 minutes, and we will continue to go through there and ask those questions. I probably have another 20 that I haven't gotten to yet myself. We will, as soon as Brian pulls up his screen there, we'll continue on with these questions. Appreciate your patience. And again, a reminder that the webinar will be recorded, and the chat window itself, both will be posted at the LA Area Chamber website and the Dr. Lucy Jones Center website as soon as it's generated. So the Zoom system generates the recording, and then we will post a link to that as soon as it's available there.
Okay, so I did find on the FAQ, so sole proprietorships with or without employees. So I think the question more is, how do you pay yourself? How do you take money out of the business? Or what does the sole proprietorship, is the income from the business, the net income for the sole proprietor? And in the case of a sole proprietor, it's basically one and the same.
Great.
And as the employee, my question would be, and maybe one of the advisors could help, if my business as a sole proprietor does more than 100,000, would then my loan be capped, or the employee calculation basically be capped at 100,000? Let's see if we can get the answer to that question.
Okay. So there continues to be this question that comes through about the difference between a sole proprietor and self-employed. Can you define the difference in this context? Is it interchangeable, or does it mean something different? Sole proprietor and self-employed.
There's a very fine line between the two. Sole proprietor usually is a business. You think of a proprietorship, perhaps you have a retail store, but the legal entity is set up under your name, but you're able to have a separate DBA, or doing business as, which in my mind categorizes the business as a sole proprietorship. Self-employed could mean that a lot of people that work in our gig economy are commonly known as self-employed. Perhaps most of their income comes from 1099 work, but it doesn't mean they have to file their tax return as a sole proprietorship. So I would go back to your individual tax return and the way that you report your income, and that would be your guide as to how the government would look at it as well.
Great. I want to acknowledge there's a lot of very specific questions coming through the chat. If we can't address them specifically on this webinar, we will provide at the end of the webinar some resources where you can get one-on-one assistance as well, because we're getting very specific on types of businesses, et cetera. I want to return to some other more general questions related to, there was a question earlier about restaurants that were not really able to operate at the same capacity previously. And so how does a restaurant that was at one, earlier in the year had a larger staff, now they're still operating, but they have less employees, can they still get this loan, and how should they look at that? How should they project what their employee will be?
Well, they would use the average for last year to start with, of what those payroll costs. And if their doors are closed, and so let me ask, did they already furlough or terminate employment of their staff?
Yeah, let's say yes. I actually saw that come through from somebody else. So they've already furloughed their people.
Correct. Well, during the 8-week period that they look at for loan forgiveness down the road, they have the ability to rehire staff, and those would count towards the calculation of the forgivable amount, basically.
So to
the
clarify,
calculation would be the same, but and if you don't rehire your employees, for the 8-week period. You can use those funds for rent. You can use those funds for utilities or interest or lease payments. But the forgivable nature of it is going to be reduced to 25% if you don't have those payroll costs.
So to summarize, because I just scrolled back up through some of the other chat questions, and there was a question that sort of related to this that says, if they get the PPP loan, should they just rehire people to pay them even if they're not working, and that will be forgiven? That's sort of the intention behind this.
Correct. That's the spirit of it. It's made to help create an incentive for business owners to do the right thing for their employees. Also to lessen the burden on the EDD right now and people filing for unemployment. And plus, your employees might be able to get more money being paid their full salaries by you than they would get from their unemployment benefits. So it's designed to benefit all three parties without hurting the small business owner for taking part in this.
Great. There's been a couple questions, and I'm going to sort of aggregate them into one around the EIDL program, and that is, and I'm going to blank on the actual emergency a disaster loan, and the difference between PPP and EIDL, and how do we make sure that there's not double dipping? And then just to clarify, for those who are not familiar with the EIDL, we did have a webinar that is posted online that does go into the details of this application that was done last week. And so you can reference that for information on filling out for EIDL. But to Brian, how do you ensure there's no double dipping? Is there something that needs to be done to ensure that?
Yeah, in the application process, they basically ask you to document what money you have, but then also the purpose of the loan is the I guess key language in there. So you cannot have two different loans to be covering the same basic purpose. And one exception could be maybe you figure, one is to cover a certain expense like payroll, and the other could be to cover another expense in your operations, and they need to be complementary to one another. So if you make both loans specific to covering your payroll costs, what the SBA will be looking to identify is where's the overlap. So my payroll costs me on average $10,000 per month, and I asked for money from the EIDL for relief of that payroll cost, that extra burden because of the coronavirus. So the SBA is going to figure, okay, well, Brian's getting $10,000 to cover his $10,000 payroll. Now he's applying for the PPP. What payroll cost or what other expenses is he going to use that for? Because we can't give him $10,000 to cover 1 month of payroll. Maybe it would be for the second month of payroll. There could be an exception there. It's really going to depend on how the SBA views your application and what your documentation is. And that's why you're invited to create a second addendum to tell the story of it. The intention is that the money is going to go to support employees of your business. And the EIDL is a little bit different, and the nature of the uses for that loan is a little bit more flexible. You just can't borrow the same money and cover the same expense with that same money with two different loans.
Great. I've got two more questions, and then we'll have some closing statements. But I just want to acknowledge to everyone who's asked questions. Again, we are capturing all the questions from the chat and putting it into a document. We'll be working to answer those in the next day or so. Additionally, you'll see on the screen, there's a link, and we'll talk about this one-on-one advice that you might be able to receive as well just before we close today. So the last two questions are, if you're an independent LLC with only yourself as an employee, you granted the loan, do you need to then run payroll so that taxes are taken out once you get the get the grant, the loan?
Okay. I'm not sure if I understand the question. So
Let me read it exactly. If you're an independent LLC with only yourself as the employee, if you're granted the PPP loan, do you need to run any payroll to yourself through your payroll company so taxes are taken out?
I think that would be, I can't comment on how taxes are taken out or how you document the employment. For an LLC, chances are you do a 941 statement quarterly. And I think that's where the employee costs need to be reported. So I would refer you back to your CPA as well as your lender on what requirements they're going to ask of you for the forgiveness part when you go to apply for the loan forgiveness after a couple of months in that part of the program.
Great.
Sorry if that was a vague answer, but I guess it depends.
Great. We're going to have to end our formal questions with Brian right here. Thank you, Brian, for that time. It's now I'd like to turn it over to Elaine Rodriguez, who runs the Bixel Exchange Small Business Development Center at the LA Area Chamber, who can talk about how you can get some of these questions answered. And so, Elaine, I'm going to turn it to you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. So good morning, everybody. Thank you, Brian and John, for trying to answer as many questions as we could in covering the PPP program today. So I know we covered, for everybody that's on the webinar, I know we covered a lot of information, and I know that there is a lot of questions, and a lot of them are very specific to your particular case. And there's, with the EIDL and with the PPP program, we want to make sure that, you have all the information to make the right decisions around what you should be applying for and what is the right combination of resources. And so what we want to make sure everybody knows, this bit.ly link that you see on the screen, you can apply for one-on-one advising. We are asking everybody to be patient with not just us, but also the SBA and the bankers. Do know that this is a very new program, and so everybody's trying to work through it as fast as we can. And we are trying to learn the ins and outs. On our end for one-on-one advising, we are not just learning one banker's program, and as I think as Brian mentioned earlier, every single institution has a similar application, but might have one or two differentiators in terms of what they're asking and who they're allowing to apply. And they're also tailoring this as we go. And so on our side, we are trying to get as much information as we can so that when we talk to you, we have all of the different resources, and then we can figure out what is the right combination of resources for you. So I want to make sure I encourage everybody to sign up for the one-on-one advising. So if you signed up for today's webinar, you've already completed half of the application. The other one is just a quick questionnaire that asks more specific questions as to what kind of assistance you need. And you don't have to be, the one key thing that we always get asked, you don't have to be a member of the chamber to get to access our resources. All of our services are 100% free of charge. And again, we just want to ask everyone to be patient as we work through the requests, and apply, and let our advisors help you understand the options and how to apply for them. And the webinar will be listed after this, so you can watch the recording. The questions, we're going to try to work through them and see if we can answer them. And everything will be listed. The whole chat, I know people are answering questions as well. The chat is also listed next to the webinar when we post it in. So you'll get a thank you email with all of the questions in the webinar. And again, for very specific and individual questions to your business, apply for the one-on-one advising. You don't have to be a member. We don't charge for any of our services, and we are working as fast as we can to get you all the information and resources you need.
All right. Thanks, Elaine. So I guess for final comments, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody and your patience. I see, about 250 folks out there, and I know this is a tough time right now. And on behalf of Wells Fargo, we're pleased to help support Bixel as well as the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, and we will continue to be there for you. And Wells Fargo is certainly prioritizing their program towards the small business owner and nonprofits. And we've also committed that all fees that we might be collecting from this, we're going to be donating to those nonprofit organizations that support small businesses. So on that, I'll turn it back to you, John. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Brian. And thanks to Elaine for sharing her insights. And to all of you, thank you for participating once again in this small business virtual forum. Thanks to the LA Area Chamber of Commerce and Wells Fargo. And on behalf of Dr. Lucy Jones Center, we thank you. We'll be back on Friday, where we'll be having a special session where we'll have a number of experts on the line, and we'll go through all the questions that come up that are timely as of Friday. It's sort of an Ask Me Anything forum. So please join us again Friday at 10 a.m. And we look forward to providing, again, as much assistance as we can to help you through this process. Have a great day.